Dee, I got spotted out in the wild.
You did? Did they go all at David Attenborough and do an English accented voiceover? Tell me more.
No, it wasn't that. Actually, the wild was up the greenhouse. And I was shopping with my sister because I mean, every other day the woman's got to go down there and buy plants. And this lady said, Hey, I listened to your podcast, and her cart was loaded
Thank
up with
you.
the salvias that we have recommended on here and stuff. And so it was kind of fun. And she later commented on my Instagram. So it was kind of fun. But anyway,
Cool. Welcome to the Garden Angelus, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden an acre and a half out of 7.5 acres way out in the country.
and I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet, about a third of an acre.
We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want you to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Hello, Dee.
Hello, Carol. How does your garden grow?
Oh, Dee. This has been the craziest spring. I have mowed twice, weeded a bunch. I could weed a bunch for decades.
Me.
I did wait until May 1st to start buying annuals, but it's like I see no sign of frost. And shoot me now if we have frost later in May. I don't think we will. I bought four
I
kinds of
don't think you will
salvia.
either.
I don't think we will. I bought four kinds of salvias, a bunch of miscellaneous stuff. My seedlings are coming along. I swear the tomato plants are growing an inch a day. And so I think this weekend they're going to have to start growing an inch a day outside.
Right.
I've pulled the first radishes. The lettuce is sitting there waiting for me to create a glorious spring salad from it. And then the flower gardens. Oh my gosh, Dee, so much in bloom. I can't hardly stand it. So
It's like
anyway,
dizzying, isn't it?
yeah, takes your breath away. You just got to do one thing at a time.
Yeah, one thing at a time.
How about your week?
So it was a beautiful week. What a beautiful week we've had. We had wonderful warm temperatures and then we had rain. And we had rain, night before last, yesterday morning. We had an earthquake last night, which was not so fun. And it did not cause any damage to my house. It just scared me. They always scare me. And then then we had rain again this morning. So we're not flooding like Texas, but we are grateful for the rain because some years we don't get any rain in spring, as you know.
Right.
So I planted some more seeds outside. I moved transplants outside. The lonely Nicotiana is blooming. I mean, not blooming. Good Lord, no, it's not blooming, but the plants are huge,
Uh-huh.
big plants. And it has those basil leaves that just hug the ground, so it's not the easiest plant to get started, but mine are doing well. And then I got two new shrubs from Southern Living Plants. One of them is this new better boxwood that they've been talking about that you can actually buy right now at Lowe's. And it's a mix, I think, between an English boxwood and an Asian boxwood. So I'll be interested in that. I went and planted Father's garden and I put those better boxwoods in his garden. And then I also got a butterfly bush, which I don't remember the name of the butterfly bush right now. I didn't write it down, but Southern Living Plants gave me that, and it's pretty cool. And then I dug up saplings of my rusty black haw, and I got two tick bites.
Yuck.
Yes, yeah, sadly I did. I made the mistake of not wearing my clothing for about 5 minutes and planting two heucheras in the shade garden, and I won't do that again. So other than that, I think, the rain knocked all of my blooms off my roses. And so I'm going to have to do some deadheading, but that's okay. Let's
That's
play
okay.
favorites.
So on Sunday, I did a little garden coaching just for my sisters. I don't do garden coaching for other people. So I went over to my one sister's house, who's the one that's at the greenhouse every other day. And she had wanted to buy a bunch of hostas. And I knew they had a ton of hostas. And I said,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to help you dig and divide hosta. I'm going to show you how easy it is.
It's so easy.
Anyway, so she ended up with like, I don't know, 10 new hostas. And I said, so
Good.
10 times 15 you saved $150, which you can now apply to buy plants.
Right. It's that garden math again, right?
Exactly. But my favorite thing was, so then I stopped by my other sister who has the condo just to see where things were and what if she's got a couple iffy spireas. But she has the most beautiful blue daisy flowers on this plant. And I'm like, what is that? And she says, you plant them. And she didn't have a tag for it. So I went home and it was, I'm going to say this all wrong, but Erigion, which is fleabane, and the variety as Azure Fairy. And I put it on Instagram and somebody confirmed, yeah, that's Azure Fairy. So I am, I'm loving that plant and I need it in my own garden.
Oh, it's
And
pretty.
I cannot find it anywhere so far. The garden club
You
in a couple of
can,
weeks is going to, or not in a couple of weeks, in 10 days is going to be at a garden center up on the north side. Maybe I'll find it there.
well, if you don't find it there, you can order it online from Digging Dog Nursery, which I
Yes.
have ordered from them in the past. I ordered quite a few of my epimediums from them back when you couldn't find epimediums here because they carry unusual things. And I'm just going to give them a shout out. And they are not an affiliate in particular, but boy, do they pack their stuff really well.
So I do want to find it. And the only thing I can think of is that when Garden Club went, and every year in May or for the last several years, we end up going on a shopping expedition. We meet on one side of town, we have lunch,
So
and
pretty.
this we went to this north side. I call it one of the pop-up garden shops in a parking lot, which some of
Mm-hmm.
them didn't really, it's like big deal. And I'm like, I went, and that's where I found a ton of perennials for my sister that were smaller sizes,
Right?
both in how big they're going to get and in the container size. And they've done marvelously. And the only thing I can think of is that I bought it there. That's, I don't know. But anyway.
Yeah, we're getting ready to have a whole bunch of plants, plant fairs. We've had a few, and you can really find great stuff at those plant fairs. I found phenomenal lavender one year at the Will, I think it was the Will Rogers or the Myriad Gardens plant fair, and it was so inexpensive. And yes, I bought it. So there you go.
All right. We'll talk about that in the commissions. Tell me about your favorite.
Roses and peonies or peonies.
That's 2 times how many
No,
of
it's more like 35,
I was
but
going to
I'm
say
trying to
times however
narrow it
many.
down.
Yeah. Yeah. How many you
Yeah.
have.
The roses have been spectacular this year. The peonies have been spectacular this year. And I just can't say enough things about all of them. I do have 2 roses that just will not break dormancy. And I actually wrote David Austin about them this week. Anyway, that's all.
That is good. And you know what, Dee? I'm just going to say we deserve this glorious spring. Last spring, a lot of stuff
Oh,
got
no
nipped by
kidding.
frost. Lilacs were a bust. This year, I don't want to knock on wood or jinx anything or whatever, but oh, it's
We
been
deserve
nice.
it.
We
Yeah, it's
deserve
been
it.
beautiful. I mean, people are losing their minds over roses in Oklahoma right now and writing me and saying, I've got to have some. And I'm like, okay, I'm all for you getting roses, but do not expect every year to look like this.
Mhm.
Seriously.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
times they get nipped really hard and you don't get any April bloom and you be lucky if you get June. Okay, so we have a question of the week.
Go for it.
I want to grow strawberries. How do I do it? Strawberries, in my opinion, are extremely complicated and they can be really hard for some people. So we're going to use those actually in our next part, right? In our
Right.
vegetable.
Because I got the same question. Because I get questions when I'm at the greenhouse. I must look
Uh-huh.
like an employee down there. But anyway, it's because I walk around like I know where I'm going. And when people like, where's the salvias? Where's this? I'm like, oh, that's in the next
Right.
greenhouse or that's over here. But there was a lady checking out with some of the strawberries that have the pink and red blossoms.
I love the ones that have the red flowers. Yes.
Yeah. And she wanted to know how big the berries would get. So strawberry questions abound at this time of year.
And everybody wants to grow them. So we are going to talk about those in our vegetable topic. So why don't you do our quote for our flower topic?
Who bends a knee where violets grow, 100 secret things shall know. Rachel Field.
So you've looked up Rachel. Tell us about her.
I have. I want to give a shout out to Susan Betts up in Michigan. This was actually on her Instagram. She has a little plaque, and I'm thinking I need a plaque cross-stitch pillow, a watercolor with that on there. But anyway, I did look up Rachel, not to get away from our flower topic, but oh my gosh, Dee, she's a children's fiction writer, novelist, poet, born 1894, died in 1942. Her best known book is called Hitty, Her First 100 Years, which won the Newbery back in 1930.
Uh-huh.
And it's about a little wooden doll and the adventures she goes on for 100 years as she passes from hand to hand and ends up in all kinds of different places and ends up circling right back to where family she came from, which is exactly
That
like,
sounds wonderful.
yes. And it's exactly like, is it The Adventures of Edward Tulane? There's a children's book that came out several years ago, which is
I was
about
thinking about a lot of other, there's a lot of
yeah.
books like that where they're teddy bears or velveteen rabbits where, lovies become real. So there
Anyway,
you
so
go.
I might have accidentally bought that book thinking that I could read
I'm
it,
not surprised.
even though it's a children's book.
I think you need that plaque.
I do need the plaque. I bought the children's book, and then because my rationale is, well, after I read it, I can give it to my sister to give to her granddaughters. I can just give them to them, and it's all good. Anyway, I definitely need that on something. Okay,
Mhm.
and Dee is now selecting that. I think she's going off and looking for a plaque for me. But we should
I
talk about our
am.
flower. We should talk about the flower. You
Yes.
suggested this, Geum.
But I only have one growing in my garden. So
Geum, which is a perennial, and I only have one growing in my garden. But when you look at this, it kind of all accidentally ties into this episode because the Geum is in the rose family. We talked about that last week.
yeah.
But it's also most closely related to strawberries.
Well, go figure. The funny part about this whole deal is that we just said, hey, we should talk about geums because they're blooming in our gardens right now. And
Yes.
and then it turns out it ties into everything else we've been talking about. That happens occasionally.
So I got some sample plants of totally tangerine,
Love
and
it.
I will put in the show notes if I got it from Proven Winners or if I got it from Darwin Perennials. I will put that in there once I figure that out.
You got it from Darwin because I got it from Darwin.
Okay.
And then later I went back and bought some more. And then they had another one that was yellow and it has since left the building or left the garden. But Totally Tangerine has just stayed and stayed and stayed. I love that plant.
I do too, and it's beautiful. We'll put a picture of Totally Tangerine, yours or mine, in our newsletter.
Yours.
It's a great orange flower. And a lot of people say I don't like orange, but you're going to like Totally Tangerine.
Yeah, it's a sherbety orange. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
It's not like basketball orange, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. So the Missouri Botanical Garden website, which is a phenomenal resource, says it should bloom from May to September. Mine usually blooms like right now. And then
Mm-hmm.
I might see a few blooms later, but it's not like it's a continuous bloom of orange flowers, at least in my
Right.
garden.
Well, I mean, yeah, mine blooms until it gets really hot and then it just sits there and it's for the front of the border. And it's just a good little clumping plant. I don't know what else to say about it. It can handle partial shade. Mine is actually in the middle of the garden right now because I expanded that garden bed and by the kitchen. It's my little kitchen border. And I actually need to move it toward the front, but I don't notice it until it's blooming and then I don't want to move it. And then I forget to move it. And by then everything's filled in. So it's just sat in the same place forever. And it's perfectly happy there, frankly.
So if I could take a little side road into that
Mhm.
topic. So
Mhm.
I always advise people to cut the edge of their bed. And if they have a spouse or somebody who says, don't make that bed any bigger. Well, if you cut that edge and cut off another 6 inches
They
every
won't know.
year, they'll never know. It's just you're just making a nice edge. But you can end up with border plants in the center of the garden, and those do need to be moved out and then bigger plants put behind them. So that's you know, just one of those things that happens when you enlarge a bed is like, oh, the border plants are now in the middle. I need to move them.
Yeah, I've got a couple of little salvias that need to be moved. There's several things, but you know what? In the great scheme of things, this is a big garden and I don't really care. So we love Totally Tangerine. And then years ago, we went to the Lurie Garden. We've been to the Lurie Garden a couple of times. And if you ever get to go, listeners, it is exquisite. We've seen it in spring and we've seen it in late summer, late summer.
Yeah.
And in both it's just I can't express how much I love that garden. Okay, I'll quit now. But in spring we saw a GM there that is very famous.
Yeah. Prairie Smoke. And we talked about this one a few weeks ago. I think that's probably one
Hmm.
of the reasons we said, let's talk about GM in general. And this is one I do want to put in my garden. And it isn't native. It's GM triflorum.
I've killed it twice.
And I would like to get it and have the opportunity to kill it.
And the
Or
thing about that GM is you're really growing it for after the flowers are done because it has the beautiful smoke that comes up.
yes,
It's a seed head. It's
yes.
very
And
beautiful.
I want that. I have a place, it's pink. So I'm going to put it I want to put it in the pink garden.
So the real reason that we talked about this topic is because there's a national GM collection in Great Britain, and it was recently featured on Gardener's World. And so,
Exactly.
yes. And so I said, hey, we should talk about GMs because it cracks me up because GMs are really an American prairie plant,
They are.
but they love our prairie plants. And just because everyone thinks that British gardeners are the bestest in the whole wide world, they are really good gardeners, but they kill stuff too. And you know what they kill? American prairie plants because
Hmm.
their climate is not suited for American prairie plants. And I was at the gardens at, I think it was Whistler. Yeah, it was. And I was walking through this deal, and they had these beautiful long borders just full of dead prairie plants in the middle of summer because they had received a whole lot of rain. And I just walked along thinking, oh, that's so easy to grow because I live in the US.
Right. So
Isn't that terrible of me?
the national collection that was featured is at Brickwall Cottage Garden and Nursery in Frittenden, Kent.
And she's adorable, the lady who does the GMs. And she loves GMs like nobody's loved GMs.
Yeah, that she has. And so their website, I it's called gmcollection.co.uk. We'll link to it. But you're exactly right. When you think about prairie plants like GM, think well-drained soil, think dry summer,
Full sun,
because in full
hot,
sun.
hot, hot.
Yes. Don't think of Great Britain's cold, cold summer. And I still see videos and stuff that were recently produced of people in Great Britain running around with jackets and scarves and coats. So it just doesn't warm up as fast.
Not as fast, but you know what? It has variable weather just like everywhere else. And the last few summers until this summer, it's been really hot over there. But I've noticed when Monty has been talking about his garden and everybody else has been talking about theirs, they're having a much more traditional English summer so far. And it is kind of chilly and wet, so wet. I think the wetness is what really gets them because think about Oklahoma. I mean, not Oklahoma, think about the United States. In the middle of the United States, we have a continental climate. They have a maritime climate. It's totally different. And a continental climate means that it is hot, hot, hot in the summer and it's bookended with rain in the spring and in the fall. And that's, or late summer. So that's more of our norm. And that's why prairie plants thrive here.
But lest you think that every GM is a prairie plant, as she will tell you on her website,
Not
um,
everyone.
there are two that are native to the British Isles, which is GM urbanum or wood avens, Avens,
Mm.
shade wooded areas, and then GM Rivale, Rivale, or water avens, which grows further now north in shady, damp areas. So there are GMs for damp shade, then there are, that are native not to the United States, which if that's what you have, you may want to check those out.
Yeah, you
And
might.
she's
I'll
doing
kill them.
she's doing hybridizing of some of these and stuff. So
Yes, I noticed that. And also the bees are doing some because they grow from they're great pollinator plants. So the bees are helping her too. That little segment on Gardener's World was really good.
So
So,
your task is to find that segment and tell me
oh,
which episode it is so that I can put it in
okay,
the
I will do
show
my
notes.
best.
That's all I ever ask is for you to do your best, Dee. That's all I have ever asked.
All right. So you want to do the next quote?
Yes, please.
I arise in the morning torn between a desire to improve or save the world and a desire to enjoy or savor the world. This makes it hard to plan the day. E.B. White. And actually, my priest, who's my friend, sent me that quote. And I thought, boy, that's the truth.
That's the truth in everything. I thought, and in gardening, it's like, should I try to pull all the weeds and do all that stuff today, or should I just enjoy what's out there? It's hard not to just stand and stare at some of these flowers. But anyway,
It's
good
been
quote.
really pretty this year. So, our vegetable this week is a fruit. And so we're going to, in the garden, we're going to stare at our strawberries, which I actually already have a few strawberries on my plants, which my plants right now are just, they're red. They're ones with red flowers that I got a while back. And I kind of let them die out, I thought, but there were little baby ones and now they've come back, which strawberries will do that sometimes. I get more questions about strawberries as a garden coach than, well, strawberries and tomatoes, those two things, and asparagus sometimes.
So the strawberries, and we talked about this. I always think of them as June bearing, which is the big berries in the June, and that's pretty much all you're going to get. Those plants are controlled by day length. And then everbearing, which is what I have, has smaller berries, but you get a big flush in late spring and then occasional berries through the rest of the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And then you brought up the day neutrals. So we had to go look up, is day neutral the same as everbearing?
Sort
And
of.
I would have said, I would have said probably yes. But we found some information on the Gardening Know How site that said, oh no, you're old fashioned if all you think about is everbearings. Day neutral is the new strawberries.
It's a new term because they've been able to take everbearing strawberries and make them much more consistent because they've been working on breeding. And so you actually copied what they said, which I thought was very, very good.
Do you want me to read that whole thing or we'll just link to it?
No, let's just talk about the part about them being categorized as weak or strong.
Yes. So a weak everbearing would have that, like, I don't know if mine is weak or not, but you may not get a consistent amount of berries through the rest of the summer, whereas the day neutrals will be stronger and you will probably get more fruit through the summer.
Right. So they're working and working on them. And when I was at California Spring Trials in 2015, they were working on berries that are just now reaching the market. And some of these are heart shaped. A lot of them have colored blooms, which is cool. There's also some alpine ones that are really popular now, which I think the alpines are considered a day neutral variety, but I don't know. And the truth is, the fruits on these berries can be smaller, but they have intense flavor. But in the case of like my garden right now, we've had so much rain that reduces their sugars
Yes, it
and
does.
makes them
The
a little
variable amount
mushy.
of, yes,
Ugh.
yes. So I have another strawberry in my garden besides my row of strawberries, and that is the wild strawberries that go rampantly through my back lawn
Uh-huh.
that have a lovely yellow bloom, and they give very small, uh, not edible berries. But I don't worry too much about them. I pull them out of the flower beds whenever I find one because they can take over.
So, one more thing about day neutrals that you found on this website, Gardening Know How. Day neutrals that have a stronger tendency to produce runners, flower more profusely, and become larger plants are called intermediate or weak day neutrals. That's just also complicated. Basically, just, well, what do you want to say about growing them? Whether they're day neutral or June bearing. I'm always like, well, if I'm sorry, I'm going to say one thing. If you want to make jam, you want June bearing because they produce
Yes.
their crop all at once.
Yep.
But you know what? You can go to the farmer's market and get berries too. I tend to like the ones that bloom. I like day neutrals personally, but that's just me.
I like I like day neutrals, and I will say this. The best way to grow strawberries is in a long, narrow bed because you'll get more fruiting on the outside of the rows
Yes.
than in the middle. So I tell people don't make a 10 by 10 plot and fill the whole thing with strawberries. Make long rows. And
Hmm.
in fact, I am reminded of one of the lost ladies of garden writing who wrote that, and you tell me whether you think she's right. She wrote that strawberries was a good plant to put on the edge of a flower bed.
Yeah, I think it would work. Why not?
And that was CZ Guest in her book, First Garden.
I love me some CZ. She's one of my favorite people. Yeah, and I was also going to say that here's the thing that people are always sad about when they ask me about strawberries. You know what it is, don't you?
Well, I don't know what makes people sad about strawberries.
Growing strawberries, not the strawberries themselves. It's the fact that you have to wait a year before you harvest any
Oh,
berries.
yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Okay, but here's the thing. If you're just growing them for your granddaughter, you can harvest your berries anytime you want to. I could care less. But if you're trying to get a really good harvest, the traditional advice is to wait a year. And that always, because when you're a new gardener, you want instant gratification. Same thing with asparagus.
But it's not just like, oh, wait a year. It's like, don't don't let it produce runners. So cut off all the runners. You want the mother plant to grow big and strong. So you should cut off any fruiting that might start, cut all that off. So they want you to just basically make that plant focus on growing strong roots. And I say the same as you, Dee. I would just plant it. And,
Enjoy it.
and unless you're a strawberry farmer and you really need that big harvest next year, I'd plant it and enjoy it.
I have the cutest picture of Claire, my youngest daughter, and she and her friends went to a strawberry farm. So my attitude is if you want a whole bunch of strawberries, unless you're just going to be a strawberry farmer, go to a strawberry farm. If you want to have fun with strawberries with your grandchildren and make them love gardening, do what you want.
Yeah, my niece takes her kids to a strawberry farm out somewhere on the west side of Indianapolis. But here's the thing about strawberry farms. If you plan to visit, they do welcome kids. And so that is very fun. But you also need to check ahead because if they have a big day where everybody's picking like crazy and kids have been all through there, they may not be open for another couple of days because they
Right.
got to wait for the next flush of strawberries to form.
And same thing with blackberries. We have a blackberry farm. It's also a strawberry farm. Same deal. They get overpicked, and so then you have to wait a few days. Okay, and then you wrote in here that you can now grow strawberries from seeds, and there's an all-American selection called Delizz, Delizz, and you can grow it from seed, and it's good in containers. I've grown strawberries in
And
containers.
I have not, and they sent me those seeds, and I apologize. I never really did anything with them, but I did see on one of the social medias there was a GardenCom member who grew them from seed. She only has a condo garden, and they actually did quite well. So
Cool.
you can buy bare root plants, and those are shipped early in the spring, hardly before the ground is unfrozen, if ground freezes. And you can plant those in early spring. You also, like you said, you can go out now to the garden centers and they'll have the different ones available. You can buy them and plant them now. Keep them
Bonnie
well
Plants
watered.
has them right now.
Yeah.
I saw them yesterday when I was out, and also I think Burpee has them. And so Burpee Plants is now sold at box stores too. So,
Yeah.
or you can go to your local nursery. I noticed that at our local nursery, the one in Oklahoma City, TLC, that they had a lot of June bearing, but they may have day neutral too. I don't know. I didn't check that hard.
And so we won't belabor it because tis not the season. But in colder climates, you may need to protect the strawberries in the
Yeah.
wintertime. And there's a Family Handyman article that I wrote a while back that we'll link to. And that's where the word strawberries comes from because people used to put like straw over them. And then in the spring, they put the straw under the plant so that the berries stay off the ground
Hmm.
and don't get muddy.
I think I think in French it's framboise, but I could be wrong. And I like that word better than strawberry. It may mean strawberry because I think bois, Bois, E means berry, but I haven't looked it up. Okay, anything else we want to say about strawberries?
I do want to say that if your birds and little rodents will
Yeah,
take little bits out of them, and so that's
netting.
a problem in your area, netting, or there you always see on Facebook and stuff, people they paint rocks to look like strawberries and stick those out there, and then supposedly the birds pick at the rocks and
I
then they
don't believe
realize, oh,
it.
it's a bad pad. I don't believe it either. It might look pretty, but I wouldn't bother painting a bunch of rocks to look like strawberries.
I wouldn't either, unless you just want to have a craft day with your kid or a neighbor kid. So when I don't think birds are that stupid because my chickens, they used to have us put a plastic egg in a nest to try to get the chickens to lay in another nest or a stone egg if you had a chicken that pecked her own eggs, which that happens. And you know what? It didn't work. I'm just going to say, I will say that a couple of times I had snakes that accidentally ate those onyx eggs, and that was kind of funny. They spit them back
The,
out.
I guess. The last thing I would say is if you've had a strawberry bed for several years and it's starting to peter out,
Mhm.
think about fertilizing it in the summertime as it's growing, or just move the bed. If there's a lot of insect pressure and disease pressure in that area, it's like a crop rotation. Find another long, narrow place to put a strawberry bed.
And they like really well drained soil that's on the sandy side. They like a nice mulch. I mean, keeping them up off of the dirt, as with almost every fruit, is a good idea because slugs get them, sow bugs, which are known as roly polies, all of those get them. Turtles. I had a turtle that loved my strawberries. So I just let him
There you
eat
go.
them because I didn't care.
We have just conquered the world of strawberries for our
Yep.
listeners, Dee. I will do a quote and take us into our book.
Great.
Spring's greatest joy is when it brings the children out. Edward Guest.
Yes. Every few days, my granddaughter wants to come over after school and we have to go take a walk. She's so cute. She showed up yesterday. I think it was yesterday, day before. And she said, Gigi, I need some water. So we got her a little glass of water. And then I said, what else do you need? And she goes, I need a cookie. I said, okay, here's a cookie. And I said, now what? And she goes, I need a walk. So we went and walked the garden.
Good for her. Good for her. So on the bookshelf, I bought this a while back. Actually, I pre-ordered it. The 1,000-Year-Old Garden, Inside the Secret Garden at Lambeth Palace by Nick Stewart Smith.
And I bought it on Kindle. And no, I didn't buy it. I think I borrowed it from the library, but I'm going to buy it because I really like this book.
Yes. And so Lambeth Palace, to those who don't know, is the London home of the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the gardens encompass about 10 acres. And this, as they say, is a very lovely read. And I'm not quite through the whole thing,
Oh, it's beautiful.
but it's a just kind of through the season, chapter at a time. He just talks about different things they're doing in the garden.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what it says. Join head gardener Nick Stewart Smith as he unlocks the gates and invites us to wander through a secret garden where nature is at the heart of everything, and where a thoughtful approach to gardening creates a haven for all sorts of native wildlife, allowing nature to flourish in the midst of one of the world's busiest seasons.
This is
True that.
busiest seasons? Cities.
Cities.
Busiest cities.
Did I say seasons?
I think you did. And there are some
I
busy
meant
seasons in it too.
world's busiest city.
Yeah, and it is
There
a
you go.
busy city. I'm only at the part where he's talking about the fig tree and how
Oh, yeah.
the cuttings and layering and how a a man who's a sergeant in some other country has asked him very kindly to give him some cuttings of their fig. And so they actually took cuttings and they rooted them for him. That's where, and I just finished that chapter. I think he's delightful. And I like that when was his car broken down or could he not park outside the garden? For a while there, he was walking the 3 miles to the garden every day.
I think that was just a personal choice to walk to the garden whenever he could or to ride his bike, because he has a couple of, I'm a little bit further than you. He has a couple of times where he meanders back to where he lives from the garden.
Yeah, he does.
And
he talks about trees, that he sees on the way and things that were popular to plant at a certain time. And their fig tree came from the Vatican gardens in
right.
Rome. They were a gift from a pope at some point. And I love that garden, because it was the Archbishop of Canterbury's garden, or is. I love how it's got detailed history so he can go back and look stuff up.
Yes. And that that is often quite true of England's landmarks and different palaces and famous houses and stuff. There
Castles
is
and
history.
all. Yeah, they kept really good track of their history. And I'm so glad Bill and I have been watching some show. Oh, I know. We watched a movie the other night called Freud's Last Session, which is based on an idea that supposedly C.S. Lewis came to visit. And in it, it's just about to be World War II. And in fact, they've just had to declare war on Germany, and they're all terrified that they're going to be bombed. I mean, they're ready for that, or they think they are. And there's just this sense of what would have been lost, sort of like what's been lost in Ukraine. But anyway, I digress. Go back to our garden book.
So the other thing about this garden, and I think the other thing they said on the back is it's a comforting meditation through the seasons on the act of renewal, hope, gardening, and our place in nature. And one of the themes that kind of comes out in the reading is that as they had to take out all their boxwoods, of course, because of the boxwood moth or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they planted in a more wild nature, I guess, with grasses and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were surprised by the number of insects and butterflies and moths and birds that came back to the garden. And so, that's just a real encouragement for everybody. It's like, you don't have to create perfection in a garden. And in fact, if you have a little bit of mess and a prairie style planting or whatever, you'll be amazed at what comes back to live in that garden. And I think that's true here. And, one of my neighbors down the way, he says, well, because of your garden, the birds, I see birds. Yeah, thank you.
Well, and here, when I lost that 80 roses out of 100, to rose rosette disease, and I started to plant more native plants and I got into native plants, my garden became much more interesting. Let's put it that way.
Yes. So anyway, that I saw this somewhere on, I don't know, Instagram or somewhere, The 1,000-Year-Old Garden Inside the Secret Garden at Lambeth Palace by Nick Stewart Smith. This isn't a review copy. I bought this. I knew I would like it. It came because it's been out for a little bit and it sat on my coffee table for way too long before I picked it up and thought, ooh, this is really good. So
it's a good book, and I suspect I'm going to buy it because I love all things English anyway. And it's just he has a beautiful writing voice, which is nice.
Yes, it is and he talks in the very beginning. He never thought he was a writer at all.
Yeah, a writer actually encouraged him to write a book. So that was neat.
And now I might have this wrong, but I'm pretty sure his wife is Sue Stewart Smith, who is the psychologist / I don't know. We shouldn't talk off topic like this, but she wrote a very good book about what gardening does to your mind. And what's the name of that book? It's very good.
Hold on, and I'll look it up.
The Well Garden Mind, I think it is.
Is it that one? Oh, well, if that's who his wife is.
I think that's who his wife is.
Yeah, there she is. Yes, The Well Garden Mind. We love that book. That was one of the first books that yes, it was her.
Yes. So anyway, that's The Well Garden Mind, The Restorative Power of Nature. We'll put a link of that in the show notes too, because that also is definitely worth a reread. But I am almost positive that this is her husband that wrote this.
I would suspect so, yeah. Are you ready for me to do the next quote for our
Yeah, and we apologize. We don't know our facts before we get started recording.
Well, the problem is sometimes we do know our facts, but then we wander off in these other little areas, and then you're like,
whoopsie.
What was that movie I watched? I don't know. Okay, ready for the next quote?
I am.
Life began with waking up and loving my mother's face, and that's George Eliot. And George Eliot, of course, is a prolific female writer, and she wrote Middlemarch and a bunch of other stuff, and she wrote it under a man's name because, well, women did that back then. So I hope I got all that right. I mean, I read that book, so I assume I got it right. Our dirt. The reason we did that quote is because it's Mother's Day when this comes out. It's Mother's Day weekend afterwards.
That is correct. So our dirt was nostalgia flowers. And we found this on Garden Center magazine or whatever, that Monrovia did a survey that said 30% of people say gardening makes them nostalgic. And for avid gardeners, that jumps up to 46%. So just that was interesting. People do garden for nostalgia. I was thinking about my niece when she moved to New Orleans. She said, "Do you think I could have lily of the valley," which was this nostalgic flower for her? And I said, "No, you cannot. You must move back to Indiana." So, but what are some nostalgic flowers for you, Dee?
Well, roses, because my grandmother had two very prolific climbers on either side of her porch, and I used to sit on the porch swing and read, and they smelled so good. So that's probably why I grow roses. Other nostalgic flowers. Well, I love lily of the valley also. It's a wonderful, wonderful plant. Well, peonies are nostalgic, right? I mean, they're old
Yeah.
and
Oh,
nostalgic.
yeah.
I can't, I'm interesting that you wrote about the Van Hootii spirea. Is that the same thing as bridal veil?
Yeah, it's Bridal Veil.
Oh my gosh, can we just talk about bridal veil for just a second? You go ahead and tell me why.
The reason why is because my grandmother that lived on the east side of Indianapolis, first of all, we picked lily of the valley out of her garden every spring and violets. And then in front of her porch was the Van Hoot spirea, which was when we would go at Mother's Day, those things would be in full bloom and they were just beautiful. I'm sure the rest of the year, and I know for a fact the rest of the year there's not much to write home about with those spireas, but they always be like grandma's house.
Right. So let's talk about how popular that that one is still to this day. Sorry, I was typing something up down for another podcast.
Because from a nostalgia standpoint, people remember it growing in grandma's garden or mom's garden.
And it's a monster. At least it's a monster in Oklahoma. It is a
Yeah, it can
big,
be.
giant, big, giant thing. And I don't know if it's invasive or aggressive, or I have no idea. But every client I have, well, okay, I'd say at least three of them right at the moment, they send me photos of bridal veil spirea because it's been in bloom for the last 2 weeks. And they just send me picture after picture and they're like, what is this? And you cannot buy it locally. You have to order it. In fact, you have to order it from Nature Hill. And you know how I know that? Because I've had to order a couple for people. So
I will say this, that a lot of people, typical of shrubs of that size, will just keep them knocked down. I'm going to guess these were 4 to 5 feet tall based on the fact that they kind of were in front of her porch rails and stuff.
they're
So,
huge. Yeah.
but I did want to back up, and you had said that lily of the valley was a great plant. I will back up and say,
Okay. It can
in
be
some
bad.
climates
Yeah.
like mine, it can be somewhat aggressive in spreading.
Yeah.
Now, I want that in the area that I have it in, and I have a variegated lily of the valley. I want it to spread. It's beautiful.
It smells
The
good.
foliage with the variegation is beautiful afterwards. So I don't mind that, but some people will warn you that lily of the valley before we get a bunch of comments. Hey, lily of the valley, not so great.
Yeah. In
So
fact, in some states it's invasive, but not here. Not here. In fact, it's a little hard to grow here because it's so dang hot and it does not like hot weather. But I love lily of the valley. It was the queen's favorite flower. And
mhm.
so I'm okay with where it spreads in my little woodland garden, but it doesn't spread very much here. And I actually had to get some from a friend that she had acclimated to Oklahoma City to finally get it going. It's not that easy here. I think Van Hootii spirea is another one that's not good in certain places. Now, peonies, herbaceous peonies, you can't hurt them. I mean,
No, you
they
can't.
they will not spread. They're just the best little flower you ever wanted. And roses aren't easy to grow either. So you wrote in here, not surprising to read that fragrant flowers are often the most nostalgic for people because scent is most memorable. It is our oldest of our five senses, the ability to smell. And so everywhere when we take that walk in the garden with Maddie, my granddaughter, everywhere I'm like, Maddie, let's smell this and see what you think. What do you think? Is it good? And we smell every rose that I know is fragrant. And we smell every peony. And then the other day she took me to, oh, I'm not going to be able to remember the name of it. It's actually a selection of a native and it's for out of Florida. But anyway, it's a flower and it's a beautiful flower, but it stinks to high heaven. And she smelled it and she goes, Gigi, smell. And I smelled it and I said, icky. Made a big deal about it. And she just thought that was the funniest thing ever. So now we have to do that every time.
Cool. So anyway, that was our rabbit, or not our rabbit hole. Our dirt was thing about nostalgic flowers. Everybody's got one. I'm going to do a quote and take us into the rabbit holes. Spring is the time of plans and projects. Leo Tolstoy.
So that made me think of something. Gentleman in Moscow, the book that's now the
Yes.
series online.
Yes.
It is, I didn't realize this, but of course I should have. It is all based on Leo Tolstoy's, like, in other words, it's an homage to Leo Tolstoy because there's certain names in it that are characters from Tolstoy books. There's just all kinds of stuff. So that's really cool too. That's a little aspect of it. All right, rabbit holes. What's yours? You
So
have a
my rabbit
lot.
hole is, well, not really a lot. So my lost lady was Elvinia Slauson, and people can go look at her. And especially if you belong to a garden club, you want to go read that post. But I spent most of the time reading the book that we've been talking about, The 1,000-Year Garden.
Mhm.
And so that, I don't know if I YouTube is reading my mind or if it's other searches that I did to find out more about Lambeth Palace. But anyway, they brought up for me, and I'm hearing the tornado siren go off
Oh dear.
just because it's 11 o'clock
Oh,
on
okay.
Friday. It's the test.
We do ours
Anyway,
noon on Saturdays, so I know what you're talking about. Okay, keep going.
so YouTube served up video. It's an hour long. It's called The Pilgrim's Way to Britain's Great Cathedrals, Episode 1, narrated by David Suchet. And I think it was filmed several years ago. And I think if you're in Great Britain or Australia, you can get it on some streaming services. But this is the only one that's shown up on YouTube. I hope they put the rest of them out. But anyway, he goes to cathedrals, and he was in the southern part of England. And one of the cathedrals was Wells Cathedral,
Uh-huh.
which is where the English author Elizabeth Goudge, where she first lived with as a child when her father was employed there as the vicar or the archbishop or whatever he was.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about her too much last week. So anyway, it just shows how all rabbit holes are kind of connected.
They do seem that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was it. How about you?
So I have one rabbit hole is I've been studying up some more on ticks because I'm actually writing a post about how to garden with alpha-gal because it's a little bit complicated and I'm almost finished with it. But the other one is kind of funny. So it's complicated. I also have something called mast cell activation syndrome, MCAS, which was probably caused by the alpha-gal. But, it's one of those chicken or egg deals. So interestingly, if you go completely vegan, a lot of vegan foods are high histamine. And my particular version of MCAS is related to my asthma, which, asthma and histamine's not so good, right?
Right.
So I went back to eating safe chicken. Not all chicken is safe. It depends on what's on it, because apparently we bathe our chicken in some stuff. I found some safe chicken, and I casually mentioned to Bill that there was a rancher in the United States. He's got a ranch in Tennessee, and he's got a ranch, I think, in Missouri, and it might be Virginia. I don't know. Anyway, it's called Amaru Hills. And he raises emus, and then a friend of his raises ostriches. And at first, the thought of eating emu or ostrich was abhorrent to me, I'll be honest. But I've had to investigate new meats because I need to get B vitamins, and those are both dark meats. Oh, and he has ducks too. So I placed an order, and I had an emu burger last night with duck fat, and actually it was fabulous. And no, it doesn't taste exactly like beef, but it's close enough. It's a nice, rich taste. This is grossing out all of our vegan listeners. Sorry. So the funny part is I posted about it on Instagram last night, and our friend, Andrea, who is from Australia, Andrea Whiteley, she posted, she's always, she's a day away. So like she
Right.
sees my stuff from last night in her early morning. And she texted me and she goes, "Oh my word, you just ate one of the creatures off the seal of Australia's flag, their great seal." I went, said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And she goes, and then she said, so she wrote something back and I said, "I'm sorry, I have to get my B vitamins." So
There you
we
go.
have friends all over the world, and apparently emu is on Australia's flag. I didn't know that. Now I
I
know.
did not know that.
So I might not
It's
mention it as much. She didn't
I don't
seem
think it's
really
on their flag.
upset.
It's on a seal. Their flag is is like stars and stripes, like a
Yeah, so it's
takeoff.
probably on their great seal of their nation,
Yeah.
which seems
Yeah.
rude for me to eat it. I don't know. Anyway,
So
yeah, what were you going to ask me?
I was going to say, I am not planning to eat an emu burger, but it sounds like something that if you enjoy eating it and getting your B vitamins, I say eat it.
You know what? It's really good. And if you can't have a burger, then it's pretty good. But I did have a nightmare last night that I was stuck at the Garden Bloggers fling and someone handed me a burger and I didn't have enough EpiPens. So apparently I have a little angst about all this. All right, keep going.
Apparently you do. We're ready for our garden commissions.
Well, you go first.
So we're recording this on Friday. So tomorrow, which will be well after this comes out, I'm heading down to the local garden fair in Johnson County. It's one of the best ever, 75 vendors.
I want to go.
Gonna okay. You got a little bit of time to get out here. So other than that, I plan to mow, tend my seedlings, pot up whatever I've purchased so far from the greenhouse, probably make another couple of trips there. I have to start helping my sister plant a few things at her condo and replace some shrubs. And so as you know, 'tis the season. I'll probably do 1,000 other things. But anyway, that's enough.
It's that time of year where we're just so busy because we got so much going on, right?
Exactly.
So in my case, I'm going to get up in my upper walled garden and wear my boots and all my tick clothing because it's a little overgrown. And I'm going to cut off some spent flowers on my limelight hydrangeas that I only see when I'm in my bathroom in the morning getting my shower. I can see them and I'm like, I need to go cut those. And then I forget, you know? And then so I'm going to do that and then keep planting, keep weeding, lay some more mulch. I pulled out a ton of grass from the bird feeders because Bill's so funny. He came home and he goes, "Hey," he goes, "Look, that's wheat. We have wheat growing." I said, "No, no, dear, that's millet. We have millet growing." He goes, "We can just let it harvest." I said, "No, we won't. We will not do that." All right, so that's
No.
mine.
All right. Well, I think that concludes this episode. We want to thank you for listening to the Garden Angeles. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
And if you listen to one of the podcast services that allows reviews, we'd love a 5-star review. It helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share our podcast with your friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
And subscribe to our free Substack newsletter, The Garden Angelist, at substack.com, which is linked to in our show notes. If you do, you get a link to the podcast a whole day early.
And if you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we're in a small commission and it costs you nothing.
Or if you want, you can set up a monthly subscription through Buzzsprout, or you can make a one-time donation through PayPal. We appreciate it.
Thank you to everyone who has done so. It helps us pay for podcast hosting.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the garden gate. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.